Welcome to Machine Tool Maniacs, the podcast where machining, fabrication, entrepreneurship, and bringing ideas to life collide. Around here, every story is a success story. I'm Matt, a second-generation manufacturer who's been in the shop since I was in diapers, learning the tools, the trade, and the people behind it all. Nearly everything in our daily lives is passed through a CNC machine. And we're here to spotlight the makers turning raw material into reality. Whether you're dreaming big or building bigger, this is your inside track to making it happen. Welcome back to Machine Tool Maniacs podcast. Today, I got two salesmen on. Some of you might be saying, oh, there goes the pod. He's just getting sales guys on now to push their crap. But I'd like to introduce to you Brad Boss and Josh LaRouche. These guys are with Hartwig, and they are great sales engineers. The reason I'm having them on today is because I want to talk about the transition from used equipment when you're starting a new shop to making that transition over to buying new equipment. And these two guys have been pivotal for a lot of shops in this region making that transition. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Brad.
Yeah, appreciate the intro, Matt. Brad Boss, based out of the Denver, Colorado area. Been with Hartwig here for about 7 years and been in the machine tool sales for about 11. So originally from Ohio, but moved out this way 7 years ago. No turning back.
And Josh.
Yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller. I always wanted to say that. Josh LaRouche, the sales engineer for Hartwig out in Idaho, cover Idaho and Western Montana. Been in machine tool sales for a total of 12 years now, 6 years with Hartwig. Moved out to Idaho 6 years ago, and it's quite the ride.
Go ahead and give us a brief intro of like your background in the industry, Josh.
I got into the industry probably about, I would say 13 years ago or so. It was back around the time after high school, trying to figure out what direction I wanted to go in life and feeling all the pressures about joining college, but didn't know, what I wanted to do in college. So attempted the college route, did that for about 6 months, and I realized it wasn't for me. And, started to feel more pressure about what I was gonna do in my future. So started asking my buddies what they do, and nothing sounded interesting at all. And then I leaned to my closest friend at the time, and he was a machinist, and I had no idea what that was. So he brought me to a shop that his dad ran. He was the foreman at, and toured me around the shop, and I was obviously mind blown with all the equipment around and what they were doing. And I was like, this is my calling. This is what I want to do. I want to be involved in this. So I went to machine tool trade school and learned everything you needed to know about manual machining, which was at the time quite boring because all I saw was CNC machines just spitting parts out. And I thought that was way cooler. But I got to learn the fundamentals and the basics of machining. So kind of roughed that out. And in the midst of that, I ended up working at my buddy's dad's shop that he ran, and did that for about a year and a half. And I was just strictly a button pusher. And I wanted to know more, but at the time I was enjoying it, just loading parts in and out and push and go and checking parts, and it was enjoyable, but I just wanted more. So I leaned on my buddy's dad a little bit and said, like, how do I grow from here? And he's like, well, you're gonna have to get employment, somewhere else and kind of lie your way into it. So believe it or not, he helped me kind of fudge together a resume and said I could do a lot of things that I couldn't. So kind of went along with it. And I asked him, I said, what's going to happen when I land a job? And, I claimed I could do all those things I can't. He's like, well, you figure it out. I was like, okay.
Fake it till you make it.
Right. So, I saw that through. I got hired on at the shop, and on the first day it was like, learn how to, he just like, guy told me, one of the foremen came up to me and was like, all right, you got to set up this machine. I was like, I have no idea how to do that. So all my true colors showed, and realized I was just a button pusher. But I just buddied up with that shop foreman who was, some 6-year-old dude, and just kept him happy. I was feeding him cigarettes to keep him happy. So it was pretty easy. But, he took me under his wing, and he showed me kind of how to do setups and a little bit about programming and how to run the CMM and learn all things inside the machine shop, doing setups and running parts and programming parts. So I grew quite a bit pretty fast in that shop, and I still wanted more. But in that shop, the next step was metrology, and I did not want to do metrology. It was not my speed. So didn't want to do inspection. So I put my resume out there, and headhunter found me and asked if I wanted to be a service tech for Southwestern Industries. So those are knee mills, bed mills, lathes that are manual and kind of conversationally programmed machines. So I took that leap and joined them, and I was their service technician. I was also selling preventative maintenance plans as well. So it was kind of half sales, half service. The regional sales the regional sales manager that was there, he took a liking to me, and I buddied up with him, and he gave me a chance and gave me a shot at being a sales rep for them. So I did that and kind of shadowed him. He mentored me, and he actually lives not too far from me still to this day. But he was huge part of that time in my life, and so did the sales thing for, I want to say it was about 6 years there. And kind of at the tail end of that, I wanted to start my own business. So I started my own business manufacturing Harley parts and accessories, and went down that road. And man, I saw some dark times in my life, and owning and operating a shop on my own. And, I basically just burned myself out, just burning the candle from both ends, doing the sales job and, the bulk of the week, and then going to the shop and running parts and evenings and weekends. And, it was a lot. It was too much for me.
Were you running those on CNCs or knee mills?
Yeah, I was running them on CNCs. Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep. And, I basically got burnt out. And so I had to make the decision to kind of shut that down. And part of me kind of regrets that to this day. But, I was looking to propose, start a family, and just, steady income and insurance started more appealing to me than that grind that I was doing. So ironically enough, I shut it all down. And I ended up, my wife and I, my then, girlfriend, Southern California, it wasn't the place for us. Everything was too expensive, and it just didn't align with our values. I'll just say that, I guess. And so we traveled out to Idaho, and her parents moved out here a few years before us, and we ended up loving it so much that we bought a piece of property, and we intended to build a home on it. So, and in that same trip, I ended up proposing to my wife, and, I promised her dad I would take care of her, and, we were going to start a family. So when I got back to California, it was only a few weeks later that I got called in the office and I ended up getting terminated. And so my life went upside down really fast, because I signed on a piece of property that, was basically, being backed by my employment at the time with them. And then I lost that. So I became a dirtbag real quick. I was unemployed for the first time in my life for about 6 months. Had to borrow money from my dad for the first time in my life. And yeah, so my life was a mess. So, actively trying to figure out what I was going to do for employment going forward. I ended up driving to Idaho and back to LA probably 3 or 4 times, just straight to take on interviews for different industries that I did not want to do. I'll be honest, I even took on an opportunity. It was a job interview of selling urinal cakes. I was looking to do anything. And that wasn't for me. But even electrical sales. And I did not know the industry. So it was a scary time. But, fortunately, there was an ad that was posted at 9:57 on a Thursday evening. And it was for Hartwig as a sales engineer. And I remember that moment vividly, jumping out of bed, just super excited that they posted, there was a job posted doing exactly what I love to do and what I was doing. So not only was I excited, but so was Hartwig. They did not think they were going to find someone so fast doing the exact same job already. So, I took the interview, and the rest is history. So I've actually been with Hartwig for exactly 6 years now, last week, if you could believe that.
Nice. Yeah. I still remember meeting you for the first time at the Denver office. So.
Yep.
And how about you, Brad? I know you grew up in Ohio, so I'm sure there's a ton of manufacturing out in Ohio. So you probably were surrounded by.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I went to school at Ohio University, and coming in as a naive freshman, I started out in mechanical engineering and quickly found out there's a lot more math and physics than I was hoping to do. So I switched to a degree called engineering, technology, and management. Was essentially materials classes, shop, metal forming, some CAM, robotics. It was like a playground for the manufacturing world. So did that 4 year program and hadn't really thought about what I was going to do. I just assumed I'll be some kind of engineer when I graduate, but had kind of a revelation that I didn't want to sit behind a desk and be a desk engineer. So searching for job postings, I saw something for a sales engineer, which I had never heard of before. And it was direct for a machine tool manufacturer based in the Cleveland, Ohio area. So interviewed for that job and got it and covered Northern Ohio and Western Pennsylvania for a couple years with them. And through that journey working for the builder, I learned what distributors were and how they had more to offer than just a brand that we were selling. Um, so I wanted to get into that side of the business. And I started that or jumped over to a distributor about 2 or 3 years out of college. Still selling machine tools in the Ohio area. Really enjoyed that side of the business. I mean, it could be anything from band saws to a 5 axis mill with a pallet system on it. Just a lot of different ways you could go with it. So fell in love with that side of it. And my wife and I were kind of tired of Ohio. So we started looking at opportunities to get out of Ohio and where that might take us. And Hartwig actually posted a job posting for the Denver, Colorado area. Being like 26 years old or whatever I was like, that'd be really cool to go out there and be able to ski and sell machine tools, and territory would be a lot more scenic than what I was used to in Ohio. So jumped on that, and yeah, that was about 7 years ago, and there's no turning back. Enjoy what I do. Windshield time's a little bit better, getting to look at mountains and keep an eye out for streams I want to come back and fish later when I'm not working. So
Nice. Yeah, actually, that kind of brings up a good point that I think is relevant for both of you. I'll start with you, Brad. How was it moving from a densely populated environment like Ohio, where it's kind of the Midwest, there's shops everywhere, to transitioning to the Mountain States region where things are a lot more spread out?
yeah, it was a big change. When I was selling machine tools in Ohio, with the distributor, if you had 3 or 4 counties, that was a pretty big territory back in Ohio.
Yeah.
Then I move out here and I'm covering a state and a half, basically. I've got all of New Mexico, then southern Colorado, south of I-70. So the geography change was significant. I could park an industrial park back in Ohio and spend a full day walking shop to shop and making calls and seeing people. But, out here, it's been a lot more planning. You got to plan your days a lot better when you're going to be in certain parts and plan ahead to make sure you can get those meetings set. Where, yeah, Ohio it was quite a different culture. From one side of my territory to the next, it was 45 minutes, where now it's about 10, 11 hours to get from one side to the other. So that's been a big change, but anymore it's second nature. I think it makes you better at planning your days. And from an industry perspective, I think it's been the right move for myself out here. Colorado and New Mexico are a very high tech environment, a lot of aerospace and defense work. We're back in Ohio. There was a pretty good mixture, but a lot of it was high quantities, low mix type work. You obviously had your job shop still doing a lot of stuff, but out here it's a market that I think fits well for myself and the products we sell with Hartwig. So it's been a good transition.
Nice. And Josh, how about you? I know you transitioned from California to the Idaho region, and I know you cover parts of Montana as well.
Yeah, I would say similar to Brad, LA is very densely populated. I probably had, I don't know, 600 accounts that I would have to call on within 12 months. And, it's the same thing. You park in an industrial parking lot and you kind of just go out and hit all these shops within walking distance. Whereas now it's, 10 hours, 11 hours to the top end of my territory, and then another 10 back down, and about 5, 6 hours wide. So it's definitely a lot of windshield time for me here. Also down in LA, the equipment I was selling was, I would say, more niche. It was tool room equipment. So it was equipment that people wouldn't really focus on much. It was smaller dollar. Also, I was in Haas territory. So I ran into it all the time where it was, well, why would I buy that when I could just buy a Haas? So that was a challenge too.
What about shop culture? Did you notice a significant difference in the cultures you were seeing in shops moving from California region to Idaho?
100%. That was the first thing that I noticed actually. My first day riding along with my sales manager at the time, joining Hartwig. It was kind of incredible that in that one day, I think we had made maybe 6 sales calls. Whereas, back in LA, it was, to 20 plus sales calls. And a lot of it was, negativity and doors slammed in faces, and nobody wanted to talk to you because down there, there's essentially a sales rep for everything, pens, papers. I mean, you name it. There's just always someone barging through the door to sell something. And
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that it gets aggravating. But out in Idaho and Montana, they're just a lot of good old boys. Everybody's, smiling and open to talking and having conversation. So it's definitely a lot easier out here.
Yeah. How about you, Brad?
Yeah, I'd say, a lot of similarities with Josh mentioned there. From a culture perspective, I think, once you get outside of the front range of Colorado, there's a lot of shops that are more laid back, even down in the New Mexico area, just because I don't think they're used to seeing the volume of sales guys banging on their door every day. So if you're in the Denver area, I'd say there are some similarities kind of between the culture and maybe some resistance to a sales guy walking in the door and trying to tell you what the latest and greatest is. But it's, it's a lot of similarities with what Josh said. And the nice part about being out here in Colorado is a lot of people are like-minded. People have similar hobbies, whether it be shooting guns, hunting, fishing, mountain biking, whatever. So it's, people that enjoy the area you live in and get out and enjoy it. And, I myself enjoy a lot of those things. So it's, a lot of common ground, which has been good.
Yeah. So one reason that I wanted to have you guys on, because I think you're both expert at it, is fostering those relationships long term and building trust with these shops to eventually convince them, to make a move to buy a piece of new equipment. So what has been a big experience or lesson that you've taken from fostering those relationships, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to kind of assimilate that to, the used machinery compared to buying new, the relationships, it's all about getting to know people, getting them to trust you and giving them a reason to trust you. When you walk in the door as a sales guy with a bunch of brochures in your bag, you're the same exact as the guy who just walked out the door before you. So it's, all about building that trust, letting them know who we are as a company, telling them what we have to offer, what our local engineering support teams look like, parts inventory, a lot of things like that are kind of the quick ways that people get the full picture of who we are and what we have to offer. Yeah, I mean, those relationships mean everything. It's, whether it's 5 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night, someone reaches out to you. It's a small shop or a large shop. I mean, for these smaller guys, it's even more of an impact when something goes down or doesn't go as expected. So they want to make sure they have somebody who will be responsive. Obviously, not everybody is working around the clock, but putting those wheels in motion when there is an issue. So that's first thing in the morning for someone who may need to tend to it. It's just something I think that these shops need, they're investing a lot of money in equipment. They want to make sure they have the right people behind it to take care of them. And, it's hard to prove that until you get a chance to get them a piece of equipment and see what we have to offer, from myself and from the team standpoint. But yeah, I think it's being a normal person and talking to people is a big part of it too. You just be who you are and talk to people like we would here on this call. And people like that, you don't need to walk in a shirt and tie and try to put on a facade and go home and change into sweatpants. So yeah, it's, that's the biggest part, is just earning that trust, I think.
Yeah. How about you, Josh? I know you've made really big progress in your territory in the time that you've been there.
Yeah, I mean, to echo a lot with what Brad had said is, at Hartwig, our mission statement is we help people manufacture and control their destiny every day. And sort of what that means is we kind of bring together, customers, suppliers, our teammates, our families. We're all involved in the community, and we just kind of build on that. And yeah, just keep it real. And I think going in and not being another sales guy or just eager to make that sale, but honestly, just to get to know that person and who they are and their families, and just straight up build a relationship. Because some of my closest friends in this role, in this job, are customers that have not even yet purchased anything from us, but we're both happy to see one another, see how they're doing in their shop and how they're growing, and also get to hear their pain points, and just provide them with helpful information, useful information. It may not be something that I sell, but it may be someone that I know. Being involved in the communities, such as being involved in the Idaho Manufacturing Alliance, or building, relationships with the local tooling guys, because those guys are, they've been on that machine tool and they know the struggles. So, just bringing in a local tool rep that can help them out in a pinch. People remember that stuff. I mean, you're not trying to, push a quote through the door, or ask for POs or anything like that. I think just straight up keeping it real and just being human goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. So, Josh, when you have a customer or somebody you've been working with, and let's say they've historically just purchased used machines and they're ready to start exploring the possibility of buying a new piece of equipment or something, financing something, what do you usually see and what do you suggest at that time?
It kind of just, I want to know more about what their struggles are, what their hurdles are, and what they're up against. And honestly, knowing if they have, and what that is, if they have a budget and what that budget is, and just trying to work with that.
Letting people know that you're not just trying to push the most expensive thing on them, that you're actually hearing what they have to say as far as, like, hey, this is kind of what I want to spend. A lot of times they'll feel like stuff is getting pushed on them. So considering their budget, I think is definitely, as if they feel that from you and feel like you have their best interest, and you're not just trying to upsell them. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
How about you, Brad?
Yeah. So when it comes down to, if they've traditionally bought used or considering buying used, I think there's a lot of factors that come down to, what is that price delta? If they're looking at a machine that's, later model, it's, or say it's 5 years old or something like that. Typically that price delta between new and used is very minimal, somewhere, around 20% or so. And if that's the case, there's so much value in buying new, whether it's a company that has 30 CNC machines or is buying their first machine. There's values to buying new, that you get that warranty, you get the install, the training, everything else that comes with it. Where a lot of times on the used market, it's just a mixed bag and kind of a gamble unless you know where that machine's coming from. I've seen in the past, when I was back in Ohio, a guy that left a very successful shop to do his own thing. And in doing so, he bought a used machine, 15 years old or so, didn't know the history on it, brought it in from out of state. And within a month of that machine, he found some kind of ghost in the machine that he chased for months and months. And it was the only machine he had on the shop. He had parts piling up that needed to get out the door, and he had to sink $30,000 into the machine, which as a one-man shop, $30,000 is significant. Whether it's one-man shop or a 50-man shop, it's still significant. But there's just a lot of those risks associated with it. So I think that's, really where it comes down to is the shop capable enough? Do they have the maintenance staff, someone technical enough that if there is an issue, they can take care of that in-house? Can they get parts for that machine? Is it still supported? A lot of those things on the used market, if they have that confidence that they can purchase parts for it, they know their way around it. Sometimes that's a safe bet for them, but not everybody's in a position where they can afford to spend a week or two trying to get that machine up into the shape they need to make good parts. So It really comes down to just, not necessarily what the culture of the shop is, but what is the nature of their business, and, kind of weighing those pros and cons, really. Because it's a financial burden, for a new machine a lot of times, but that's really the only burden you have with new equipment, is getting over that price hump.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning that in the beginning, you're building your systems, you're getting your customers, you're finding jobs, you're finding work. So it's not as detrimental to have machine downtime, but once you start hitting that point where you are busy and you have your machine, your spindle time scheduled out, you
Mhm.
cannot afford downtime on your spindles nearly as much. So I happen to know you have a customer down in Durango that was very successful with having their own used machines, and they were even very capable of fixing their own machines and did very impressive things. But they've recently made the decision to start transitioning into buying new equipment.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that because they are an anomaly. They're very technically savvy guys. They buy equipment that is as high tech as it comes. Secondhand on the market. They buy this machinery used, but um, they built a successful business off that, and there came a point where they weren't able to get parts for some of these machines that were not as commonplace as a lot of the stuff we see in today's market. So that's really kind of a part of where they transition from new to used, is just that inability to get some parts for it, the constant, almost scheduled downtime to a certain point of, we've run this machine for a month or two without any issues. It's coming. We got to plan for a week of debugging and getting that machine back up and running. So and I think they've seen the value just with us as a resource too, to call us when they have questions, rather than trying to search through what manuals they may get with a used machine, or seeing what they can find on forums online or whatever. So there's a lot more information available too when it comes to buying new machines. Whether it's onboard manuals or calling up, an applications engineer and talking to them and just getting it done like that. I know when we worked together, as an apps guy, I used you extensively to just call customers if they were banging their head against the wall with something, and that's invaluable to shops. They want to have those resources to call. Could they find it? Yeah, but something that might take them a couple hours to find, make a 5-minute phone call and get you up and going. So
Yeah. So, Josh, I know you have employed tactics to help alleviate some of the anxiety over such a big purchase. As far as doing demos or financing or trade-ins. Do you have any examples that have really worked out to your favor, helping customers just get over that anxiety of making that big purchase?
Yeah, I think there was a shop in town locally that was in between us and another builder, and one of the legs up that I was local and the other guy wasn't. So I kind of used that to my advantage. And in a certain scenario, this guy was working out of his garage, so he didn't really have much room. It wasn't like a full blown shop, and we have the ability to bring in an Akuma demo box, which is essentially just a control you can travel with. So we had that come up from Utah. One of our apps guys, Austin, brought that up, and believe it or not, we had nowhere else to go. We tried utilizing the local hotel lobby, but it was pretty full. There was like a local basketball tournament in town or something. So ended up bringing them into my house and doing a demo right in my kitchen. Showed him the control, because one of his biggest pain points was understanding the OSP control, because he has a Haas in his garage and that's all he knows. So I was just looking for any way I could to make that transition as easy as possible for him. So like I said, we brought the demo box up, put a program in the demo box, and kind of ran through the control ahead of time before he ended up committing to it. And we spent a lot of time on that control and going through it. And at the end of it, he ended up admitting like it's really not that complex. So having the ability to show users that control and just make them realize that that hurdle is not so big to jump over once you're there, it helped out in a big way. So I think utilizing the demo box, or even bringing customers to other shops that are customers of ours and showing them equipment and having them speak speak their mind on how Hartwig is and who we are, because honestly, that goes a long ways. There's not too many people, there's not too many companies out here that do support equipment locally like we do. And that's ultimately what a customer wants, is they want to know how far the service tech is away when they need him. That's the most important piece. So, again, we have a leg up on our competitors. We have a technician that lives here in Idaho. So again, it just makes that transition real easy for customers.
Yeah. How about you, Brad?
Yeah, I think Josh made a breakfast for his customer that day in his pajamas and everything that morning. I remember seeing some pictures of it. So
Yeah, I
that
do.
was
I
a
do
first.
remember seeing pictures of that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean what Josh has done with that, he doesn't have a building local up there at Idaho, which is cool to see, using the local resources that you do have, and still getting creative with it. Which is nice to just have those items available to you, whether it's a P500 simulator or like we have here in Denver. We've got an office that we typically have a handful of machines on. It's hard to get people out of the shop, but a lot of times it's nice to go over there and have an engineer on site, and or one of our Hartwig engineers, and just spend some time going through the controls. A lot of people are more concerned with what's different compared to my Fanuc controller. How do I do this? And just being able to sit there and show them on the machine how we do it. Typically, it sheds a lot of light on it. Then it gives us the opportunity to dive deeper into some of the stuff that just means more to shop owners. You can do more with this. So that's a big advantage, having the local showroom here. And like Josh said, the best resource is a customer who's run your equipment, and get in there and let the prospective buyer talk candidly to the customer who's run that equipment, and just step away, let them talk, and let's hear what they like and don't like. And I think that's part of having confidence in the machinery, is no matter what they say that they don't like, it's never anything too pressing that they won't like. It's usually, well, this is different on the OSP compared to whatever control they may be familiar with. So that helps, just getting real honest answers from people who've run those machines, and also utilizing the local resources that we have to dig deeper into it, if they've got certain questions. So
Yeah, that's good. I think it's beneficial to elaborate for folks is what a lot of people don't fully recognize is that sales engineers such as yourself, you have the opportunities to go into a lot of machine shops. So you guys both, if you're perceptive, which I know both of you are, but if it's a perceptive sales engineers, um, you're going to start gaining a pretty good perspective on what works in a machine shop and what doesn't. So, starting with you, Brad, what are some mistakes or hesitations that you think hold the shops back versus the ones when you go into that are super successful?
yeah, it's we touched on it earlier, but I think a lot of successful shops, they are open to having, whether it's a CNC machine tool sales engineer walking the door and kind of listening to all of them and gathering what's available, what's the latest and greatest, as well as the automation, the work holding guys. Those are the guys that are really in touch with what's going on, and what's new. And, you're typically not really going to tell them anything they haven't already maybe seen. But those guys are very open to new technology. Not necessarily want to be serial number one on a machine coming to the US market, but a lot of these successful shops, what they're doing is looking at what's next. And, the big buzzword for years has been automation. And everybody thinks that's some big industrial robot or some huge palletized system, but it can be as simple as adding a bar feeder to a turret lathe, and making parts complete with a sub spindle and dropping them in a part sketcher, throwing them in a rotor rack, whatever it may be. There's so many different levels to it, but even beyond that, automation can be a 5-axis machine where they're used to 3-axis mills and running it in a lathe, doing more in one. That's the wave of the future. We've got high property values here in Colorado, so it's expensive to have a big 30 to 50,000 square foot facility. So every inch of floor spaces needs to be maximized to get the most out of a shop. And that's what I'm seeing successful shops doing, is investing in these technologies, 5-axis doesn't have to be some kind of automation, but just getting creative with how they hold parts, leaning on their tooling suppliers, building a network of people that touch the end part, whether it be work holding, tooling, machine tools, software providers, is really being in touch with what's the latest and greatest. And those are the guys that are really pushing the envelope and making great parts, making them faster than a lot of their competition. And, the people that we see continually growing, and in a market where you may hear some people say, no, it's a little slow. These other guys that are investing that kind of stuff seem to be the ones that are perpetually busy and never say anything about being slow. So, that's the wave I see currently today.
Yeah, I'll actually chime in real quick. I think to hit more on what Brad had just said with being creative, I think that's huge, and a lot of people these days are being more creative and doing more things with one. And what I mean by that is, in my neck of the woods, mill turns are more popular than ever. And if you can find a way to bar feed, your job, essentially, if it fits in, let's say under 3-inch bar, and you can, feed that through the spindle and let a mill turn get after it. I think that's huge, and you're becoming more efficient if you take those steps. So thinking outside the box when it comes to your parts can lend itself very favorable. And, also some of the mistakes that I see too is like people getting hung up on price point. If you were to, ask for a quote for a lathe with milling, y-axis, and sub-spindle, initially that may look attractive, but realistically, when you start to tool that thing up and you get those live tool holders that do have a pretty hefty price point, and then they have, a lifespan that you have to have them rebuilt X amount of hours or X amount of time, it starts to get pretty expensive. Whereas maybe you do want to look at a mill turn, and a lot of people kind of just don't. They just dismiss it immediately. But I think that, if you get to that point, you should just take a look at it, because cathode tooling can be more affordable, and you can be more creative, and you can also create more versatility in your shop as well.
And Matt, I know there's a shop you're familiar with that we've both been in, but they're a good testament to investing in multitasking machines, like the Maltus platform. Shop that traditionally had done a lot of 2-axis turning, or turret lathes with live milling and y-axis, but then moving parts between a couple different mill operations. Seeing them with a robot loader in front of a Maltus or a multitasking machine, loading blanks and dropping a part complete, and they're touching it one time, and it's literally just from the saw loaded in the robot, and then you get a perfectly complete part after. Those are the stories we like to see. And you see them now a couple years later reinvesting in that same technology, because they're replacing minimum of 3 machines with one Maltus cell with a robot on it. So it's neat to see, when the stuff we preach becomes reality for these shops, and they get to reap the benefits of it. And it's a curve. I mean, it's not easy. You don't just get a machine on your floor, a multitasking lathe or mill, and start printing money and just making good parts. It's a process to get up and going. But a lot of that's why you choose the right partner to be there to help hold your hand and get you familiar with these new technologies that will take you to the next level.
Well, you guys are moving Multises like they're hotcakes, and I would hope that I would have some credit for that. I happen to know for a fact that probably almost every shop I ever walked into with either of you guys, some customer would be like, well, how do we make this? And I'd be like, a Multis. Probably to the point where it was annoying.
Yeah. But it's
the
truth.
People just don't know what they don't know, and that's sometimes those people that are stubborn and want to shoo away the sales reps, it doesn't favor you in the long run. We do have some helpful information. So, give us a chance.
Well, a lot of people look at them and think, oh no, those are lathes. You only make round parts. And nope, it's 6-sided machining is what it is. Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of the few ways to get to all 6 sides without having some sort of robot that has to transfer from one vise to the next.
Right. I got a shop in Montana that's loading a bunch of tiny parts in Mighty Bites. And it's just incredible when when I'm in the shop and I see that happening. I'm like watching one person, wrench in and wrench out parts inside those Mighty Bites. And I'm just like mind blown on it, because, it's, again, like, have you thought about bar feeding that? And nine times out of 10, they haven't. And, you start, telling them about how they can do it. And, they're like, wow, let's learn more about it. And then people like yourself, Matt, or any of our other teammates in the apps engineers department come in and we lay it out for them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff too that, to the point of being receptive to someone coming in and kind of telling you what the latest greatest is. We see a lot of stuff in different shops of these shop owners and guys that are getting so creative with how they're doing things that, you don't read about that in modern machine shop. This is stuff that people are developing themselves, but it's an idea, we may not come up with on our own. We've got another customer with just a 3-axis mill. They put a trunnion on, and they've got a 4-sided tombstone on this little trunnion. And they're loading up, I don't know, dozens of parts on there. But to unload parts, they're using a little gripper that comes out of the tool changer from Gimbal Automation, I think is the name of the company, to pick finished parts up overnight and place them on a tray that's on the pallet offside the tombstone. Stuff that I wouldn't think of, but it's technically an automation system that costs them a couple $1,000s to invest in rather than putting a big industrial robot in front of the machine. So there's a lot of stuff we pick up on, and, we're not sharing industry secrets or, giving away what people are doing necessarily from a part processing perspective, but just how to get more creative with doing more with less is kind of the name of the game currently.
Yeah. Helping them think differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all great points. So do either of you have any perspective on depreciation when buying new equipment, service costs, downtime, reliability? Any input on that?
From a new machine perspective, you're saying with depreciation, if you buy a new machine, like,
Yeah.
yeah. We're fortunate with the brands we represent. At least Akuma, they hold their value extremely well. I mean, if you look on the used market, you're not going to see many used Genos M560s or even our 5-axis mills, just because they're kind of like the Toyota. They just keep running. Parts are accessible, and especially if you treat them right. I've got customers with machines from the late 70s that are still running to this day because they treat them right and machines are built well. So, from a depreciation standpoint, I feel like it's kind of like a car. You drive it off the lot, you lose a certain value. I don't know what exactly that number is, but a lot of times I see people on the used market, they're asking so close to what a new machine costs today that it's, I think that the used market, at least in my territory, is not as much of a competitor as I felt like it used to be, because that delta between new and used, unless it's a 20-plus-year-old machine, is so minimal nowadays.
I actually used to joke about Akumas a little bit, that people who buy Akumas forget to upgrade because they're so reliable that they just fall into the Stone Age because they just keep running. So they forget that they also need to consider the technology that they're falling behind on.
Yep.
When I worked for Southwestern Industries down in LA, I would always walk through all these shops, and again, we were in the tool room, so we were in the back of the shop, but I was always interested in the premium line of equipment, right? So as we're walking through the shop, you always hear people talking about, oh yeah, the Mazak's down, the Maury's down, and all these other brands are having issues, but the silent killer in the corner was always the Akuma. I never heard any issues with the Akuma. They just run.
Yeah, some old cadet or something.
Yeah. Even to this day, man, I can't tell you how many shops, especially more so in Montana, that have 25-plus-year-old machines that are just running and they're just holding tenths. And I mean, the same is true to the current machines that they're putting out today. They just run.
Yeah, they do. How about leasing? Have you guys seen many people that lease machines, or do they typically always just buy them?
Majority, what I see is buying the machines. There's different levels to leasing, I think, but a lot of times if you don't have that buyout option at the end, or even if you do, you end up paying more for the machine, obviously in the long run. And that's not just with interest and everything, but primarily, if we're talking financing, it's to buy that machine outright after 5 to 7 years or whatever that term is. So But there have been some big companies that I've worked with that they can show a lease as an operating cost rather than a capital expense. So to them, it does make sense for how their capital expenditure is set up to show it as an operating cost. And if they get a machine for 5 years and the bank owns it after that and it goes on the used market, to them it's worth it because they got 5 good years out of a machine, and then they'll get a brand new one in there once that term's up. But that's not nearly as common.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Josh? Any input?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Bub was saying. I think majority of my customers are financing with the intent to buy out the 5 to 7 year mark.
Yeah. Well, moving on. You guys have any advice for shop owners that they should ask themselves before buying?
Biggest thing that comes to mind, immediately is just what is the network behind the brand that you're considering buying? Not to put on my sales hat too much here, but a company like Hartwig with 220 plus employees and 75-80% of that being some form of support, whether it be parts, service engineers, applications engineers, phone support. Those are the people that you want behind you to pick up the phone and call. Having a 24-hour call line is huge. A lot of people have second and third shifts. They're not just working 9 to 5. So you want to have people that you have access to after hours to keep you up and going, or just ask a simple question. And beyond that, the builders, what's their infrastructure like here in the United States? Do they have tech centers or a main hub? What kind of parts inventory do they keep on hand? Because it could be a great machine, but things happen. And you're going to need parts at some point. If it's an oddball thing that you got to wait for 6 to 8 weeks to come over from Japan or Germany or whatever, that's detrimental to a shop. So those are the main questions. Who's behind it? What's the parts inventory like? And what's that value of parts inventory that you have in the United States? And then where are those support people located? Are they local to me? Are they within a couple hour drive? Like we touched on early in the call here, we cover a lot of geography here. So if you're down on the border of New Mexico and Mexico, odds are you don't have a guy right next to you. But could we have someone there the next day? Yeah, we get someone down there, and that means a lot. Having someone on site to address those issues when they come up.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. It's not so much what you're buying; it's kind of who you're buying. So look at the team that's behind it, and kind of what we touched on a little bit ago was, the Akumas. You tend to see a lot of 20-plus-year-old Akumas in the field, and part of that is because Akuma is anti-obsolescence. They support everything they ever made to this day, unless technology surpasses it, obviously, but another benefit is single source manufactured. So a machine is going to be, built inside and out from Akuma, from the boards to the drives, the iron, to the software, the control, everything. And sort of the benefit to that is one throat to choke, and that's us, that's Hartwig. So you got one phone call to make. Typically it's the sales guy, which is okay, but we can always redirect you and to the right person. And for speaking for Hartwig, if make that commitment to Hartwig, you tend to become part of our family, and you start to get these guys, cell phone numbers, and you start to know them personally. And again, it just kind of brings us back to you're building that personal relationship. We're all, I can, speaking for myself at least, and kind of Brad said it earlier, is like, I'm up 4:30 in the morning, and I don't go to bed till about 11 at night, and almost every other day I'm texting with a customer for one reason or another. So I think it's just that it's the network that you're buying into for sure.
Yeah. One I think I'd like to add to this that I know both of you could probably elaborate on even more. I really think shop owners, they assume that you can read their minds sometimes, right? And they want a machine. Everybody wants a machine that can just do everything. But the reality is that doesn't exist. So they really have to get crystal clear on what they're trying to accomplish with this purchase right? Are they trying to make 90% of their parts within a certain size range? Do they want to make them in one operation? Do they need a parts catcher? So they need to make sure that they're crystal clear on the options and the things that they need this machine to perform. If they have specific parts that they're trying to make, that's always the best approach to say, hey, I need to look for a solution to make this part. Here's where my head is at, and collaborate with your sales engineer, and B, ask them questions. Ask them to prove to you why this machine holds, you know, much tighter tolerance throughout the day versus competitors. Do you guys have any additional input on that?
Yeah, a lot of that too is, like you said, asking those questions, and you get to know what questions to ask just from talking to more shops and going through more projects and all of this. But a big part of our job as sales engineers is being a sponge and listening to what the customer is saying and asking the right questions, because there's nothing worse than, like, early in my career, there'd be times you're just excited you to be at the table and to be talking to someone about possibly selling a machine, and you kind of got earplugs in because you're not hearing everything they're saying. And no worse feeling that machine showing up and realizing they expected a parts ejector, something that we just completely missed, because it's, to them, every quote looks different from every builder that they're getting them from. So they don't know what's standard and what's not. So now, it's being more transparent about, what is standard, what's not, what does that function mean, what parts are they trying to make, what kind of quantities are we talking about. Then you can really, be the solution provider instead of just putting together kind of a me too quote of, hey, here's a 3-axis mill, you guys figure out the tooling. I like to make sure, touch on it earlier, but connected with the right tooling, people, work holding, all that good stuff. But yeah, it really is just asking the right questions. Like you said, challenge them a little bit. Are you making the parts currently? If so, how are you doing it? What are those bottlenecks with their current process? Is it handling the part too much? Is the cycle time too long? Whatever it may be. And then really formulating what's the solution going to be. It's not just, another machine exactly like they've got that they're making the parts on. That odds are that's not what they're after. It's, what's next, what's going to get you to that next level, and what's going to get you making those parts better, faster, more repeatable, whatever it may be.
How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I would obviously agree with that. I think it's good to challenge the customer. I have an example of a shop that's here in Boise that originally they thought that they were needing to automate their post processing operation. Which, what I mean by that is like sort of deburring and polishing and that sort of stuff, because the shop, they started out with one polisher, and then they grew to two, and then three, and he thought that his issue was essentially manpower. So he was asking about how he can automate that process. So we looked into it, and it's a pretty expensive process, and he's got to commit a lot of floor space to that process as well. But the more we delve into it, we realize that the part that he's running can be ran more efficiently on an Akuma mill, and on a, for example, a Genos M560. And we ended up trying to prove that process through test cuts, and showing them the surface finishes that we can get out of that machine. But not only can we get a better surface finish out of the machine, but we can also do it 30% faster. We ended up getting that customer to commit to the machine, and no more than 6 months later, he has no bottleneck issue in post processing. He now has inventory of parts on the shelf, and he couldn't be happier. He wishes that he made the decision 4 years sooner, is what he said in his own words. He wishes he listened to me 4 years sooner, which was obviously music to a salesman's ears. But yeah, it was just it was cool to see. But it is, you have to challenge the customer on their preconceived notions, and just kind of trying to prove out a different way, a different process.
That's actually a good point, because some builders have a tendency to embellish the specs on their machines.
Right.
How have you combated that, Josh?
I think just proving it out to them, and just, this goes back to kind of building the relationships and bringing those shops to current customer shops and kind of showing them what they're doing, how they're doing, and the results that they're getting. A lot of these machine tool builders claim that they have, thermal compensation. Well, how does that work? Can what does that look like what does that thermal compensation look like on that brand, right? For the Akuma, they have thermal active stabilizers, so they're actually, they're doing compensations actively live, right? And then also, like, proving the difference between a C-frame machine and a double column style.
No, I agree with what Josh is saying, and from the perspective like the sensors, like you said, it being physical sensors and the spindle or casting, they're just um, above what some other builders do, and not to name names on a certain builder that is a 4-letter name, but the way they spec their max torque and horsepower and some of this stuff is always a question when they're only familiar with buying that piece of equipment. They ask us, it's like, well, why is your continuous rating only X amount of foot-pounds of torque? It's like, well, can you get a actual consistent or continuous rating from that builder? And I had a customer just 2 weeks ago. They were pressing me on the max torque of this lathe, and we were about half of it, or half the max torque of this other builder. And I told him, I said, call that salesman back in there and ask him, what duty cycle is that for, that you hit that max rating? What's your continuous rating? What's your 30-minute? All these questions. And they had no data on that, where, from our perspective, our specs may not always look the flashiest, but it is damn well 100% what you will be able to do all the time. If it's a stated accuracy, torque, whatever it may be, we're so confident that that's going to be what it is. And typically Japan is so conservative that you're going to go above and beyond, whether be accuracy, repeatability. We're typically exceeding those specs. So
the Japanese builders take their specs on their machines very seriously compared to other builders from other countries. We'll just put it that way. The Japanese are very serious about. I don't really think they take embellishing performance specifications lightly. We'll just put it that way.
We had it not too long ago. The people are familiar with the Hartwig brand, who made the T series lathes and very high precision, high accuracy machines. Obviously some changes throughout their companies, so it kind of opened the door for some of these larger companies to look at other suppliers for machines. And Kuma was one that was in the running, and we put the machines up to a laser and ball bar, and got the data and put it in front of them, and we exceeded what the T series machines were. But the interesting part is, if this customer had just looked at what we stated in our spec proposals as accuracy and repeatability, we were far off from what the T series stated. But it's important to take into consideration, like we said before, what those duty cycles may be, or how they're calculating those accuracies and repeatability. Because if you look at a T series brochure from the past, when Hartwig was making those, there are a lot of stipulations to how they reach those accuracies. It's not just consistent. You come in the morning and start making parts like that. It is under some serious, strict conditions
and it was anchored to the core of the earth.
Exactly. Yep. So, there's a lot of those things, and those are questions worth asking, just to really get a full picture of it. But like Josh said before, it's more so proving it, whether that's putting a laser and ball bar on it and testing and giving those results, or, give us a piece of your material and let's cut it, and inspect it.
Well, a couple quick questions for you guys, and I think I know the answer to this first one, but I'm curious to hear what you guys say. We'll start with you, Josh. If you had your own shop and made your own product, what would it be?
It was funny because I was just thinking about this recently. You and I talked quite a bit, and you had mentioned that you were going to start making tobacco pipes. I think is what you said, right? Is that your future
Yeah.
endeavor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was I was kind of thinking about that, and I was in my head like, well, what would I do if it was something creative like that? And you might laugh at this, but I thought of making really high end, flashy toothbrushes, something that people use all the time. It's just randomly came into my head. So I thought about that, but honestly, I think I would probably still honestly start making Harley parts and accessories again. I still have some things in my mind that have not yet come to market, and part of me wonders and wishes what would have happened if I kept releasing these products, and where would I be now? So I tend to reminisce on that. So maybe that's it. Maybe toothbrushes and Harley parts.
Hey, that's a good combo. You
It's
can
a great combo.
sell them both as a kit.
Yeah, yeah.
You should make those out of tungsten, Josh, the toothbrushes, so you get a workout while you're brushing your teeth, kind of like a shake weight or
Oh,
something.
shake weight esque.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, for me, I think I'd make metal Zen can holders. I'm just kidding. That's something they have in the Zen reward store, so I'm not taking that. Um, it sounds stupid, but fly fishing reels. I have a
Yeah.
customer that does that, and it's fascinating to watch. Just a 4-inch round billet of aluminum turn into a true piece of art, and then see it be anodized, and just never be able to recreate what they do. But fly fishing is something that I spend my free time doing, and to be able to put your own touches on something like a fly reel would be pretty cool to do.
Nice. Yep, I guess both those on for you guys. The toothbrush. I mean, honestly, dude, in this day and age, I mean, there's guys making single blade razors and killing it.
Mm-hmm.
They're cool. So, I think a toothbrush could be totally viable.
Yep.
So going back to you, Brad, what do you wish every customer understood about buying new equipment?
We've touched on it a bunch here, but it's truly the first thing that comes to mind. It's, who are you buying from? And getting the full picture of what that is. Like we said before, that the local resources that you have, just everything that touches that machine, and having the trust in the person that you're purchasing equipment from, that they're not seeing it as just transactional. They're there to help you through the process when you call them. A year, 5 years, whatever down the road, and still need help. Treat them the same as the day they're looking to buy equipment. So typically, people's first impressions are fairly correct. So if you get the sense that it might be transactional, and may not be the kind of guy to pick up the phone when they need something, or brush it off and maybe not act on it as quickly, typically your feelings on that are correct. So back to trust and just knowing the full story of who you're buying from.
Nice. Good one. Josh?
Yeah, I would have to agree. The big one is trust. More often than not, do customers tell me, "Man, I wish I listened to you sooner," or "I wish I bought this sooner." And it's like, man, all I want to say is, "I told you so." But be receptive, open minded, and just understand that people like myself are being truthful, and understanding who you're buying from is key. I truly have rock solid relationships with my customers, and when I tell you that I'm 24/7, I have one cell phone. It's my personal phone and my work phone. So I'm gonna respond, and I can't guarantee that for the other guy. So
Yeah, well, you both do, from my perspective, a great job. So nice work.
So do you, Matt.
yeah, you do a great job, Matt.
Yeah. So, well, on that, I'd like to thank you both for joining us today. And if you guys want to throw out any contact information, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, Brad Boss, like I said, live here in the Front Range of Colorado in the Denver area. Cover southern Colorado, south of I-70, out to the western slope in New Mexico. Contact can be found on hartwiginc.com, HARTWIGINC.com, or LinkedIn, Brad Boss. That's BRADBAAS. 2 A's, 1 S. They say Bass, B-A-S-S, but it's B-A-A-S, like Haas, but with a B.
Man, that stings a little bit.
It does, yeah. But people get it, so you got to say it.
It rings. It rings, but it stings.
Yep.
And Josh, go ahead and give them your region that you cover.
Yep. So Idaho and Western Montana. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Well, right on. Thanks for joining us today, boys.
Thanks, Matt. This was fun.
Thanks, man.